Hey guys, this is Joe. Today I want to introduce you to our partner Vanta. Achieving ISO 27001 or SOC 2 compliance can unlock major growth for your company and build customer trust, but the process can be time intense and costly. Vanta automates compliance, getting your audit ready quickly and saving up to 85% of associated costs. And Vanta scales with your business, helping you enter new markets. Join 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora that trust Vanta. Claim 20% off Vanta at vanta.com/startupradio. That's vanta.com, spelled vanta.com/startupradio.
Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast, YouTube blog and internet radio station from Germany. Today I do have a cannabis entrepreneur here with me. Hey, Philip, how you doing?
Hi, Joe. Nice to meet you and thanks for having me.
If either he or I sound a little bit tired, it's because the Super Bowl went into overtime and we didn't get enough sleep last night. We already cleared this out. Nonetheless, Philip, welcome very much. You are the CEO and co-founder of Cantourage.
I'm the CEO of Cantourage, but I'm not one of the founders. Actually, it was founded by two close friends of mine, and I joined the party in January 2021. The company was originally founded in 2019, but I joined a bit later, and here we are.
Talking about you, I've seen you did some pretty interesting stuff in your life, including a stay at the University of Sydney. How did you like your time back there?
Yeah, those back in the heydays. It was lots of fun. It's a beautiful city. It was lots of fun being there. Unfortunately, I just spent a semester there and then I had to go back to Germany, but it was fun times, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. I've seen you then became a consultant for more than 8 years. And then there is a break in your CV that I really find interesting, because from associate principal in a consulting company, you jumped ship and became the manager director of Aurora Deutschland GmbH, which is also in cannabis business. And then you went on to manage Cantourage. But can you tell me, how did you go from consulting to cannabis?
Sure. So I did consulting for quite some time. I was maybe on a track to at some point become a partner. But I wasn't having too much fun in the end, to be quite honest there. So the consulting company I worked for was founded by a couple of McKinsey partners. And those guys actually also become mentors of mine. And when I talk to them quite openly that I like to do something else, they basically said I should reach out to people in the startup industry in Berlin, because they saw potential in me in order to build a company. And lucky me, they reached out to a former colleague of theirs, Florian Holzapfel, who was one of the founders of Pedanius, which later became Aurora, which was the first cannabis wholesaler in Europe. And initially it was just to meet him, to better understand the startup scene. And then we had a chat for a few hours, and then basically offered me a job at his company. Lucky me, I soon became then also the managing director or the CEO of Aurora, actually also Aurora Europe, which was quite the ride. It was in the early stages of the cannabis industry in Europe. Aurora, which was at that point in time one of the largest, if not the largest cannabis company in the world. And I was tasked to build a European platform. it was quite the ride. It was quite challenging, but also a huge success, at least from our perspective. Built a company from 30 employees to more than 250 in a few years. Together with the team, we also won the tender to cultivate cannabis in Germany. So lots and lots of experiences, which also now helps me in order to further build another cannabis company, Cantourage, which is now also one of the, if not the market leader in Europe for cannabis.
Let's talk about Cantourage here, the company you are heading as CEO, because there are many things different here. And I would like to talk about that because first, you are not the necessarily privately held VC funded startup we usually have here. Can you talk a little bit about that and what decision made you do it differently?
So we went public in November 2022. At the end of the day, we thought there are not a lot of opportunities for private investors to invest into a hot topic like cannabis. There's just a few listed companies in Europe. And we thought we'd like to give investors the opportunity to invest into cannabis rather early, and also to invest into a growing company like Cantourage rather early. I just mentioned that the founders of Cantourage, they sold their first business to Aurora. They saw what happens if you're acquired by a larger company. And this time around, we'd love to do it differently, being at the driver wheel for the foreseeable future. So even though we went public, the founders, the management team, we still own over 75-80% of the company. So we like to be public in order to have, let's say, ample opportunities to grow in the future, to raise capital, while remaining in the driver's seat, not being under the gun of outside or external investors.
I understand that this also gives you access to those capital markets, debt and equity, which should be a big bonus. But on the other hand, you also have to very regularly publish all your numbers, which is usually something the startups don't like to do. How does this feel for you right now?
I mean, it's an additional layer. It's an additional layer of complexity. So far, so so good, I'd say. And it also helps to professionalize your company at the end of the day. So we publish our numbers, our figures on a regular basis. We streamline our processes in order to get there. So at the end of the day, it also makes you further develop the company, to further mature. Also, especially looking at our numbers, I feel quite good in order to publish these, because compared to our peers, I think we're doing not too bad. So we feel, it's good to have that transparency and to show the world what we are about. And given that we've been successful so far, I have no trouble talking openly about what we do. There's no need to keep it secret or private. We're out there in the open and talk openly about what we do, where we're successful and where we're not successful. So far so good, I'd say. Yeah.
I would be interested when you talked about that. There are a lot of capital market events around Germany, around the world. When you are there, are you in the ugly kids corner, or are you really approached by investors who are interested how the cannabis business is developing? What's the feel like there on the event?
But it depends, and it's also evolving over time. I think so. The first time around, we went to the Eigenkapitalforum in Frankfurt in December 2022, and we were the odd kids, maybe the ugly kids in the corner, because nobody has heard about us, and cannabis was something rather new, and the discussions were mainly around what is cannabis, what is medical cannabis, what's the regulation like. So we didn't really talk about Cantourage. It was more about educating potential investors about cannabis in general. But I think the last couple of years that has somewhat changed and evolved. You can sense that investors also did their homework, and they're asking more precise questions about cannabis, or specifically about Cantourage, our past performance and then future potential. You can see that some investors, not all of them, are really interested in cannabis, and also, let's say, do in-depth analysis of the market, the competitive landscape, and asking good questions these days. It's not broad about cannabis, so it's more fun for me, and we can see that more people are interested in investing in cannabis, also from an institutional perspective.
Talking about education here, we've really grown massively since we had the likes of Finn Hensel with Sanity Group, or Cansativa here with the Snoop Dogg investment. Could you lay a little bit the groundwork how this is currently working in Germany, at least the legal cannabis business? I'm sure that's the only one you could talk about here. And then we try to put you in where you fit in terms of the value chain there.
As of now, there is only medical cannabis in Germany and also all over Europe. There is no recreational market as of now. As some of us may aware, there's lots of talks about recreational cannabis use, obviously in Germany, but also in the Czech Republic and Malta and wherever. But as of today, it's rather a medical market. Those markets have been in existence for quite some time. They're here and they're growing. By the way, that's why we are 100% focused on those medical markets as of today, because there's ample room to grow and ample room to make profits there. No need to think too much into the future about any recreational market, because in the here and now, there is a market where you can gain market share and make profits there. In terms of the lay of the land, currently looking at 3 archetypes in terms of companies being active in Europe. On the one hand, there are the vertically integrated players, so doing basically from seed to sale, doing cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, sales and marketing, all under one roof, mainly done by Canadian companies like my former company, Aurora, because they could raise billions of dollars in order to build that infrastructure and build that value chain. On the other hand, there are, we call them wholesalers or distributors, which are focusing on buying cannabis from somewhere in the world, and then basically just wholesale it to pharmacies, other wholesalers in Europe. And Cantourage is somewhere in the middle. So we focused on manufacturing, because that's the most challenging part from a regulatory perspective. So there's lots and lots of different cultivation assets around the world, but they cannot supply any medical market because they're lacking needed permits and licenses in order to turn an agricultural good into a medicine. So therefore, you need to have certain permits and licenses to do the pharmaceutical manufacturing. That's what we focused on initially. It took quite some time to get there. And now we have a special operating model where we focus on manufacturing and distribution, but we can source cannabis from around the world. So the wholesalers we just talked about, they have access to a few cultivation manufacturing sites around the world, but that's about it. So mainly they are reliant on 2 or 3 different suppliers, and we built a special operating model where we source cannabis as a raw material from around the world. Currently, we have more than 65 cultivators out of 18 countries under contract. It basically send us cannabis as a raw material, and then we do the manufacturing here in Germany and then distribute it all over Europe. As of today, we're selling into 7 different European countries.
So basically, you are also very early stage. In terms of growing, you don't do the growing by yourself, by Cantourage. You have contractors to do that.
I wouldn't call them contractors. We call them partners, because at the end of the day, they're independent companies, and we have a special model in place where we share the achieved revenues here in Europe. Because at the end of the day, we believe in partnerships, and so everybody needs to eat along the value chain. So we split the revenues we achieve here in Europe with our cultivation partners. I mentioned before, so I work for Aurora, which is one of the vertically integrated players. They invested heavily into that infrastructure. So it's a rather asset-heavy operating model. And by choice, we said, okay, we need to be nimble, we need to be agile, we need to be flexible. And there's lots and lots of good cultivation partners around the world. No need to invest into that infrastructure. Let's rather be asset light, focus on manufacturing and distribution, and not invest heavily into cultivation assets, because we can solve that problem in terms of product supply by partnering with excellent growers around the world.
And I did have a lot of questions here that I wrote down. Let me try to do first a little bit more the random ones, and then the ones that would drive the story further. You were talking about Canada. My understanding is that there are Canadian companies, because they've been very early in the regulatory game. Because at the point you were talking about, it kind of hit me that Canada is not necessarily the place to grow cannabis. So there had to be a different driver here.
I mean, yeah, on the one hand, you could say, okay, from a climate perspective, there's better regions to actually grow cannabis around the equator. That you could basically grow cannabis outdoors or in greenhouses where it's energy efficient and labor costs are relatively low, especially compared to the European Union. But Canada was at the forefront in terms of the regulatory game, as you just mentioned. So cannabis was fully legalized also for recreational use in 2019. And that led to the fact that there was a massive market, and those companies were already public. They could raise lots and lots of dollars in order to build an infrastructure. And initially, in the early days of the cannabis industry, people built cultivation assets where they could, not where necessarily made the most sense. And you were allowed basically to build cultivation assets in Canada. That's what they did. Now you can see that from a cost perspective, from time to time, makes more sense to build it somewhere else. But now the infrastructure there is there and needs to be used to a certain degree. But I should also, before I forget, I should also mention there are lots of excellent growers in Canada at the end of the day. So there's a legacy. There is lots of experiences, lots of know-how. So as of today, I think the best cannabis in terms of quality that is available in Europe is basically imported from Canada. So they are leading the pack, that's for sure.
Another curveball question is, when you were talking about all those capital markets events and so on and so forth, what went through my mind was, do you have a lot of guys from the ESG community that invest in you, or does your business model violate their rules?
It depends. Just recently we had a lengthy discussions with a potential investor that was really adamant about ESG and future ESG rules, where as of today, cannabis from time to time is an issue, especially if we talk about recreational cannabis. So it depends in terms of the investment criteria. There is certain institutional investors who don't have any issue at all with cannabis. There are a few which do have issues, and there are others which do like Cantourage because we're focusing on medical cannabis only as of today.
Also, I would like to hint that, especially during the interview of Cansativa, we've talked about the dream of legalizing, as you already mentioned, cannabis here in Germany for recreational use. I think they dreamed of a really, really big thing, and then a very, very small proposal came along, which apparently shattered the dreams of some of the people there. That's what I would like to keep it. I think you would have a lot to say about that.
I think so. Initially, there was. I mean, at the end of it, let's talk about the market potential first. So Germany is by far the biggest medical market in Europe. And so we can talk roughly 20 tons per year currently being sold in Germany in terms of medical cannabis. And the conservative estimate of the black market is roughly 400 tons. So there is a multiplier by 20 in terms of a potential market. So that's a huge boost, huge upside for lots of cannabis companies. So that's why everybody was looking at a potential recreational market in Germany. There's lots and lots of potential. But at the end of the day, so we at Cantourage, we're active in the medical game. We're active in a lot of different European countries. So we didn't build the company based on a pipe dream that the recreational market might happen soon or soonish. We always looked at the development, also talked to, let's say, a few people involved in drafting that bill. But we were never fully convinced that there will be a full legalization within the next 1 or 2 years. So usually regulators take their time. Usually there is a pilot program. They evaluate the data before they really open the legalization of the floodgates. So I think it's a good sign. It's a phased approach, step by step, to warm up to the idea to fully legalize cannabis. And we'll see how that goes in terms of recreational cannabis. But we should also mention in that proposal, people mostly talk about recreational cannabis, but there's also a major change for medical cannabis in Germany, because it will no longer be treated as a narcotic. It's just an RX, so a prescription medicine. That should actually help further grow medical cannabis in Germany, because it'll help, or it will ease the burden on doctors and pharmacists to prescribe and dispense cannabis. So we rather see a short-term boost for the medical cannabis here in Germany. And in terms of recreational, given it's home grow, given it's mostly for so-called cannabis clubs, you can't be active in those as a cannabis company. There is no limited potential, let's say, for cannabis companies in the recreational game. However, we rather see a boost in the medical game, given the reclassification of cannabis as a non-narcotic.
Yes, I do believe first, what is really important here is that there is not a instant legalization and then the lawmakers realize, oh, we made a big problem and full speed backwards. That would be a big issue, because then it would make it impossible on political terms for years and years to come to legalize this. So a more cautious approach is the better one here.
And at the end of the day, to me, it's also a German approach to do it like that. So step by step, it's a bit of a wait and see approach, evaluate the data, and then further improve the regulatory framework in order to, let's say, build a sustainable and long-term structure for companies to engage in cannabis. So I wasn't too surprised that it's a step-by-step approach.
Yeah. And the thing that it's not regulated as narcotic would mean a lot, because there's a very strict law here in Germany, Betäubungsmittelgesetz, and you have to follow a lot of regulations. And if you don't, there are very harsh punishments involved. And that would reclassification out of this class would not necessarily make it easy, make it simple, but it would be make it less regulated. And if you make mistakes, it's not as harsh as a punishment as it is in other classes. But let me get from the curveball question back to my original idea of the interview. you guys do manufacturing. So what I had in mind is like you get delivered like big amounts of in containers, in climatized containers, with one or two security guys, and then it drives into a physical factory, and there something happens. Is it like that? And do you do it in Germany? And how does all of this stuff work? Because that's the important part. Many people out there will never in their whole life have a chance to know how this is working. And if they're really a little bit geeky and want to know how stuff works, that's their chance. So go ahead.
I mean, it's pretty accurate what you just described. So we basically import the plant, or we call it biomass or raw material, into Germany, actually into Frankfurt, and then it gets sent to our manufacturing hub, which is in Bavaria. And then basically we turn that agricultural good into a medicine, and that means drying, trimming, means also reducing the microbiological load. It's packaging, it's labeling, it's testing. So there's lots and lots of different steps from a pharmaceutical perspective in order to have a safe product at the end of the day. So it's a lot of work. So it's not that simple. Pharmaceutical manufacturing, but we do that all in Germany, and then also send it from our hub here in Germany all over Europe, different products.
I see. And that's also the part that makes you really different. You are importing, you are making it ready as a medical product. As you said, microbiological loads, you don't want to have a lot of viruses or bacteria on it. I think you cannot completely cleanse it because it's a natural product, but you'll have to reduce this load by a considerable amount, I'm sure.
So there is, so in terms of, so at the end of the day, it's a medicine. So there's a tight regulation also in terms of different levels of contamination. So we need to comply to those rules and want to comply to those rules. And so we came up with a rather unique and innovative method to reduce the microbiological load. Most of our peers use irradiation, so either gamma irradiation or e-beaming. And we came up with a new, innovative method, which is a bit more gentle to the product, which is we call it smooth. Because at the end of the day, it's a natural product with natural ingredients. And to me, it sounds counterintuitive to use radioactive sources in order to treat the product. So we have a new method which reduces the microbiological load as needed and is rather gentle to the product, so we can preserve terpenes and other active ingredients in the product. And so far, feedback from patients and doctors is pretty good in terms of our product.
And then you also have a platform on which the wholesalers and maybe even the pharmacies can directly order.
Yeah, that's correct. We call it a platform, basically, which is connecting our product portfolio to other wholesalers and or pharmacies. So if they want to, they can directly order product via our platform or what they call us up here. So honestly speaking, most of the pharmacies in Germany are not yet fully immersed in the digital space. So there's lots of communication via email, also via phone. But we try to also offer a fully digitized experience for pharmacies. So if they choose to, they can also use our platform to order products.
And I've seen in one of your presentation, you claim around 80% of the market for medical cannabis. Does this mean you import something like 80% of the product there?
It's not 100% accurate. In terms of different product formats, there are, let's say, for monographs, how you can dispense cannabis as a compound medicine. So there is a dried flower, there is dronabinol, there is extracts or oils, and pharmaceutical CBD. And the last component is as finished products. And we are currently engaged in 4 product formats. So we are dispensing flour, dronabinol, extracts, and CBD. Most of our competitors are only active in 1 or 2 product formats. And we're active in 4 different product formats or 4 monographs. And that's roughly 80% of the market. So our total addressable market is 80% because we're not active in finished products.
I see. This is where we're going. Usually I close the interview with 2 questions, but apparently everybody who'd like to invest in your company can do so via the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. You're traded there daily, so all the investors can go there. But usually I have the last question: are you looking for talent? And what we usually do is the people already listen to the interview. They know you guys by now. And what they then do is looking at the careers website. So I would suggest we link the careers website because every company is currently is really looking for talent, right?
That's for sure. Always on the lookout for the best talent available out there. And so we are located in Berlin and Bavaria, but also looking for talents basically all around Europe. We have, so most of our operations is in Germany, but we also have a subsidiary in the UK based in London, where we also, if not the leader, one of the leaders in terms of medical cannabis. So feel free to check out our careers website, also check out opportunities all around Europe. So Cantourage is growing these days. So we're also hiring new talents.
And everybody who'd like to learn more, they can go down here in the show notes. There will be a link to your LinkedIn profile. Of course, there will be a link to your company website and your career website where people can have a look around. Philip, it was a pleasure talking to you. I learned a lot personally today, not only about the role of Canada in growing cannabis, and I really enjoyed the interview, and I hope to have you back in some time.
Cool. Thanks for having me. It was lots of fun.
Thank you. My pleasure. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.